Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? Let me know in the comments. I'm gonna give it a minute just to let a few more people populate in to answer your question, Chad. I slept very well. It's good to get some sleep. All right, so I think we can go live now. I think what I want to address in this video is what I think is maybe a misconception about what's going on with this fan base right now because I'm reading everything. I'm reading the Twitter comments, I'm reading the Reddit, I'm reading everything. And what I'm sensing is that we've gone from talking about basketball to now talking about things that are maybe personal, like maybe too personal, right? And with this specific Fred VanVleet and hey, what's up, man? What's up, Jesse? With the specific Fred VanVleet and Scotty Barnes thing, someone someone emailed me this morning and I was sort of shocked to read what they said. And effectively the point that they were making was, are you helping? Are you helping this, right? If you wanna see it get better, how are you helping, right? By making low light videos about Fred, I don't think you're doing anything for him. I don't think you're doing anything for his trade value. If you wanna see him traded, you're not doing anything for his trade value by pitting these 2 against each other. And I was like, "Man, that wasn't my intention, but if that's what I've done, then I should talk about it." So here's a counterpoint to this. Friction builds character. I've firmly believed this my whole life. Some of the most difficult people we meet in life, people that we find to be very different than us, sometimes challenge us to grow in ways that we wouldn't have otherwise grown. Scotty Barnes is, at least prototypically speaking, in terms of who he is as a person, has never been a scorer. That doesn't mean he can't score. That doesn't mean he won't be able to score. And he might average 30 points per game someday. But right now, in who he's been for most of his life, he's always been a facilitator. Problem is, the NBA level, a lot of guys come in as facilitators, but they don't find a way to succeed at the NBA level because they get stuck in facilitator who can't score, right? So while it may pinch a nerve with me to consistently hear Nick Nurse say that, oh, Scotty needs to be more aggressive, Scotty needs to be more aggressive. What we saw last night, and I'm going to get into it tomorrow when we do the film breakdown, but I want to just poke at it right now. What happened last night with Scotty Barnes? He was very aggressive, right? But why was he aggressive? Why was he so aggressive? Why can't Scotty just do that? I mean, if you can do it against Ben Simmons and you could do it against Kevin Durant and Nick Claxton in the paint, why can't you do it against everybody, right? Well, we're going to get into it tomorrow specifically with the diagrams and the videos. But I want to say that one of the biggest reasons that he was able to do it was because of how the Nets were guarding him. And how were they guarding him? For whatever reason, the Nets decided to guard Scotty Barnes like he was a shooter. They were picking him up high. They were picking him up at full court. If NBA teams decide to guard Scotty Barnes the way that they decide to guard Fred VanVleet, it's lights out for NBA teams. Because right now what's happening, here's what's happening. I'll give you a clear example. Scotty Barnes grabs the ball at 25 feet from the basket. What happens to the defender? Does the defender hug up on him? No. No. The defender is standing 5 feet back, right? And that amount of space is very difficult to attack. And it doesn't help that there's spacing issues in the Raptors offense, but this is somewhat limiting Scotty. So he has like two options. Either he's going to attack a defender that is playing him for the drive and doesn't respect his shot, or he's going to pass out, or he's going to launch a three, which he's not extremely lethal at yet. And that's putting it kindly. He's not a great three-point shooter right now. So in order for Scotty Barnes to become the player that we envision, the player that we want him to become, he's going to have to become a serious scoring threat. Here comes the friction and fire thing. There's two philosophies to this. Philosophy number one, you hand him the ball the way that the Houston Rockets have done with Jalen Green, who was already a scorer, by the way, or you hand him the ball like Cade Cunningham in Detroit, who was already a scorer. You see where I'm going with this. Maybe there's a version of this where we play it. Let's say we play it out on two timelines. Okay. Admin you Pensari, you know Scotty watches your videos. Um, how do you know that? Okay. Um, so here's the two timelines. Let's say timeline number one, right? Like alternate timelines. Timeline number one, you trade everybody, right? And you just hand Scotty the ball, right? Timeline number two, you put him in the fire. Like that timeline is sort of like throwing him to the wolves. But the timeline number two is you force him to earn it. You force him. It's like when you I don't know. I was a member of a frat. I don't know anyone out there who was a member of a frat. We had to go through initiation, right? Sometimes I think that it can work both ways, but it's difficult to say which one would have worked better when you only do it one way, right? So, us as fans, we could get to a point where we say, okay, if you hand him the ball, the offense is going to be so much better because he's going to do this and that. But he might never actually evolve to the level of scorer unless you put him in a position where he has to actually be frozen out of an offense and have to really earn it. And having a player like that come up on a good team, and I think a good example of this would be Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant came into the league. He was a backup to Eddie Jones. What did he have to do? Did the Lakers just say, hey, 18-year-old Kobe Bryant, we think that you're so talented? I think the Lakers were as high on Kobe Bryant as the Raptors are on Scotty Barnes, if not higher. I think Jerry West was so high on Kobe Bryant that he traded an all-star center to draft him. So he was high. They knew he was going to be good no matter what. They still put him behind. They still put him behind Eddie Jones. Why didn't they just thrust him into the fire the way that all these lottery teams are just feeding these guys shots? Because they wanted him to earn it. They thought that that would help him somehow. And he did. Within a couple of years, Eddie Jones was gone. Kobe Bryant was, he was the starting shooting guard and he had to earn it. Then there was the Shaq thing. He had to consistently be like a second option behind Shaq, and it drove him insane. And it split the entire LA fan base apart. Now, of course, you're going to say, come on, Rob. Fred VanVleet is not Shaq. He's not someone that Scotty Barnes needs to defer to. Pascal Siakam's not Shaq. Fair. But I think that somehow there is a philosophy here where if you go the other way, the way that the Pistons and the Houston Rockets have, you might just make Scotty Barnes into more of what he already is, which is a facilitator. And 3-4 years from now, we might look back and say, I wish we'd developed him a little bit differently. So I think there is a point here to make that nothing that I feel towards Fred has like a personal attachment to it. There's nothing personal. I don't think he's a bad person. I don't think he hates Scotty. I hope that that hasn't been the tone of these videos. I really hope that I'm not a part of this, because there are a lot of people out there who believe that I am a part of the problem here. And I don't want to be. I don't want to be. I don't want to be adding drama. This was never a drama channel. Check the description. Analytics, basketball insights, no drama. This is not about drama. And lately I'm seeing a lot of drama coming, and a lot of it's being directed at me and saying like, okay, you're a part of this. So I don't want to be a part of it. Every idea that I have about Fred, it's about ball dominance. That's not a personal thing. That's a play style. Ball movement within the offense. That's not, I hate everybody. It's just, I don't like the way they're playing. Okay. It's not personal. It's basketball. Okay. So is Jay okay. Anyways, I'm not going to focus on that. Now, I wanna take a moment to just say that when some okay, to those of you who grew up in the 90s, do you remember Yo Mama jokes? Do you remember those? Yo Mama's so fat, blah blah blah. And then what do? You respond with something wittier, something better. And then that person responds. And then the other person responds. And next thing you know, 5 minutes later, you've insulted this person's mother 10 times. And you're like, how did I get here? How did I become a person who is insulting somebody's mother that I've never met? It started with the first Yo Mama joke. That's how it starts. When you start responding to things, right? And I think I'm getting to the point that some of you guys are going to in the comments there. You start responding to things, becomes an arms race, right? So somebody comes out and says something really horrible about Scotty Barnes, and if you're Camp Scotty and that person's Camp Fred, then you're going to be, okay, well, let me now find something equally horrible to say about Fred VanVleet, right? That's where it gets dicey because it starts to veer personal. I'm not going to address which YouTuber I'm talking about, but I think you guys can figure out who I'm going to talk about. I'm going to mention it just once, and then I'm just going to leave it. I don't want to discuss this ever again. I don't want to talk about this dude ever again, but I want to talk about what he said, and it's not right, okay? Difference. Fred VanVleet dominates the ball too much. He needs to get off of it sooner. That's basketball, okay? That's basketball, okay? Scotty Barnes needs to be more aggressive on the court. That's basketball, okay? That is basketball talk. Scotty Barnes needs to improve his three-point shooting. He needs to be more aggressive. He needs to develop a little bit more focus in the post. That's basketball. Fred VanVleet is probably too short to be guarding a certain player in a certain matchup. Fred VanVleet has taken a step back offensively. That's still basketball. Okay. Scotty Barnes and Pascal Siakam might be a awkward long-term fit on the court. That's still basketball. I don't necessarily want to pay Pascal Siakam a supermax because I think he's going to slow down in his 30s. That's still basketball. We're still talking about basketball. Let me tell you what's not basketball. When somebody says that Scotty Barnes is dogging it, that he quit on his team. Quit on his team. That's not basketball anymore. Now we're talking character. That Scotty Barnes might leave because we don't know how he feels about Canada. That's not basketball. That's personal. And unless you know him, you shouldn't talk about that stuff. Because that's the type of shit that really does start to, it's a tumor. It's like a little cancer, right? Because you spread enough of that, people pick up on it. The 1,000+ people who watch your videos, they pick up on that. They start chatting about it on Twitter. They start adding Michael Grange on it or whoever. And now it starts to get really personal because now he's approaching free agency. And suddenly there's this little seed that you planted in people's minds way back when that this guy might not want to be here. And unless you know it, unless you talk to someone who told you that, who would actually be in his inner circle, who can confirm that for you, then you're capping. You're capping for views because you're a drama llama. And that's me being personal. And I don't want to be personal, but it bothers me that you're doing that. And I need you to stop. Keep it to basketball. You don't think he's a point guard? Okay, fine. Not a point guard. You don't think he has the mobility to do it? Totally fine. You think he's a rebounder, hustle big, who can maybe hold Fred's jockstrap someday? That's still basketball. And I don't care what you think about basketball. Okay? I don't. Trust me. I don't. I don't have any I don't put any credence into what you have to say about basketball. No offense. You know the game a little bit. That's great. A lot of people know the game. I don't need to hear it from you personally. It's just I'm not trying to get controversial. I'm just saying I don't care. But keep it to basketball. Keep it to I think they're a good fit. They're not a good fit on the court. Okay, fine. But when you start saying that a guy quit on his team and you bring that point up every time, how do you know he wasn't sick? How many times? Who made you a body language expert? He quit on his team? Man, the same guy who is after a win against Los Angeles, this guy who is in the gym at midnight with his trainer, shooting jump shots, trying to get better because he didn't shoot well that game. That guy quit on his team. The same guy who didn't take a break all summer, the same guy who came back after 2 games. 2 games. He missed 2 games with that ankle. Do you know how long? I talked to somebody who saw Scotty Barnes MRI and tell me how long that injury should have sidelined him, the Philadelphia series. You better have some serious inside information if you are going to openly, repeatedly, not once, not twice, many times question this guy's competitive drive. I saw people do it with Vince. I didn't have a platform then. I did not have a platform then. I was just some random guy in a forum saying, Guys, check your facts, check your facts. Nobody heard me. It wasn't true then. It's not true now. Don't introduce this into the air. You never heard me say anything about like Fred VanVleet hates Scotty. Okay. You heard me say Fred VanVleet is chasing a new contract. I think that's still basketball. You can debate that. Maybe it's not basketball. Maybe that's where I've crossed the line. And if I've crossed the line, check me on it. Please do check me on it. If you say, hey, just saying repeatedly that this guy is playing a selfish brand of basketball, that's getting personal. Okay, I will find a different way to say it, or I'll stop talking about it as much. Fine. But when you question the heart, the will to win, when you accuse a player who tries as hard as Scotty Barnes, who has played hurt, bro, all season he has played hurt, and you're talking about blow-bys, you were a point guard, right, bro? You were a point guard. You're what, 5'7"? You guard Trae Young. You guard those guys. You guard Nikola Jokic in the post. You guard Kevin Durant on one possession, Kyrie Irving on the next possession. Tell me how many times you give a blow-by. This is crazy. And you got a whole bunch of people thinking that you know basketball. Okay, that's getting personal. See, I'm getting heated now. I don't want to get heated because I know like when I go on these rants, like I could get a little bit heated, but I just wanted to address this so I don't have to address it again. Jeez. Don't make it personal. And if I have made it personal, I promise you I'm going to stop, because watching you do what you do has given me a real pause to look in the mirror and say, if I am doing 1% of what this guy is doing, I need to stop. Okay. So if anyone wants to call in, you have the number right there. Not the number, it's a link. I'm going to put it in the description. You want to talk, talk it out, and we can definitely talk about it. To give a okay. So if someone's going to call in, I'll definitely redirect it to that. But I want to say that to the specific point of Scotty as a scorer and how that's going to unlock him, right? What we watched yesterday was gaps being exploited. Okay, we have Zed here. Okay, Zed, talk to me, man. What's going on, Zed? Hello? Zed, you there? You got to turn your mic on, man. Okay, Zed. That was a flop. Okay. Come back if you figure out your mic. Okay. So to the specific point of how offense is going to open up, okay? Sometimes we get too deep into the numbers, right? Even analytics, which I believe are a lot better than counting stats, right? We get into this guy's better than this guy because he scores more. This guy's better than this guy because he has a higher PER. One of the things lost in all of this is the other guys. Who are you playing? Who are you playing with? I think that's important. All of the players who are struggling right now in the Raptors offense, Scotty Barnes included, okay, all of them are struggling with space issues. We talked about it before. What is going to happen is if the Raptors can improve their spacing, and if Scotty Barnes can become the type of player that you actually have to respect 25 feet from the basket, then you always have the gap. You always have the gap. You always have that one step past. And once you get past your defender, if you have those big, long strides, straight line drives like Scotty Barnes, you're getting to the rim, you're getting a foul, or you're kicking it out to a wide open shooter who can hopefully hit shots. So I think one thing that was sort of lost in my post-game analysis last night, and I didn't want to harp too much about Scotty because I think it's difficult to do that after a loss. Had they won, trust me, I would have talked a lot of like, oh my God, Scotty's amazing. But I gotta say, it was impressive what he did. But the reason he was able to do what he did is they guarded him like he could shoot. You got to snap. You got a snapshot of it. Sometimes unfortunate or fortunate situations give you a snapshot of who a player can be, right? For instance, Pascal Siakam in the bubble, sort of a little bit rusty, a little bit, coming off Pascal Siakam, not even in the bubble, just after the groin injury. When we saw him after the groin injury, not this one, but the previous one, right? We saw a little less burst. We saw a little less quickness. To me, that showed me what his skill set would be if he lost a couple steps. That's projecting, right? Last night, I got to see what Scotty would be if he could shoot. He didn't have to shoot, right? That's the thing. He didn't score a single three last night. He lived in the paint. But the Nets' decision, for whatever reason, to guard him up high, to try to force the ball out of his hands or to force a turnover. We saw Fred VanVleet throw a pick for Scotty Barnes and him just go straight down. And he's quick. Like he's not shifty quick. He's not Ja Morant, but in a straight line, this guy can get to the rim in like one step, right? So I think we saw the vision last night for the type of player he can become. And is Fred VanVleet helping him become that type of person? Is he helping him become that type of player? Right? It's possible. I don't know. I'm not in the Raptors practices. People judge the vibe. People say, sometimes there's some body language things between them. I want to bring up a thing that Leo said. Sometimes guys really like each other off the court, but hate playing with each other. You don't have to be a genius to figure out how Scotty wants to play. He's told you. He wants to play with movement. He wants to play where everyone touches the ball. That's not how Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet play. But if you know anything about Scotty, and if you have an The Athletic subscription, if you are subscribed, I can't believe I'm basically doing a free promo for them, I guess. There was a beautiful article by Eric Kareen about Scotty Barnes when he was drafted. Go read it. Go read it. I promise you, you will not go away disappointed. You will find out so much about the player and the man and who he is. This is a guy who found out that a substitute teacher. Or we have Zed back on here. Zed, did you fix your audio?
Yeah, man. I hope I did. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. What's up?
Oh, great. Hey, I got to be honest. I've never called into a show or anything ever before in my life.
Okay, you're losing your
But
virginity here. What's up?
yeah, I've been watching your video from day one. Just kind of stumbled upon them, and I really think you're doing really excellent work.
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching basketball for most of my life, but just watch it as a casual mostly. And while I can't dive into the X's and O's like a lot of the pros, I do know what I like seeing and what I don't like seeing on a basketball court, right? And
Okay.
the problem with Fred VanVleet, again, great story, and just to get some housekeeping out of the way, anyone who's trashes him personally or his family, that's just low life stuff. And whoever does that, shame on you. Not going to do that. Not going to comment on that any more than that. But
Mm-hmm.
just watching him play, it's just brutal at times. And I can only the only example I can give is watching James Harden back in his Houston days. He was putting MVP numbers and winning quite a bit too, but that's just not the type of basketball that I like watching. I can appreciate what he did, and he's an all-world scorer and all that, but
Yeah.
that's just not something I like watching. And I just don't get when some people take that as a personal shot at Fred VanVleet. Like, I think that's where we need to differentiate between we're just commenting on someone's play and nothing more than that. But that's all I wanted to say. Big fan. Really like what you're doing and the community you're building. Yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you so much, Zed. I appreciate it. Yeah, to that specific point, I mean, players are who they are, right? Pascal Siakam is an isolation scorer. He did not come up in the San Antonio Spurs and the Memphis, Grizzlies system. He didn't, learn that stuff. He's, I think here's the thing. I think all of these guys, every player on this team deserves our support to some extent, right? Like we shouldn't be hating players. I don't think anyone should hate a player. I think if you ever find yourself saying, I hate Fred VanVleet or I hate Pascal or I hate Scotty Barnes, I think maybe this is a moment to stop and just pause. There doesn't need to be hate. To those of you out there saying, like, how can we turn our back on Fred VanVleet? He was, an integral part of the championship. I don't disagree. He was integral. He was important. He's been here for a long time. Doesn't loyalty count for something? These are the talking points of some of you guys. I get that. I totally understand that. And, you know, one of the things that this YouTuber said, which I think made some sense, is if you do him like that, the other guy's watching, and wondering, when are you going to do him like that? I get it, right? I get it. To those of you saying, well, why not hand the ball to Scotty? And there's a lot of you, especially in this community, because I believe that has been one of my central talking points. And maybe a lot of you came into this community as, well, this is the channel that's talking about the Scotty vision going forward. I get that too. And to you, I say, we may have to wait a little bit longer than we want to, but we will get there. It will happen. And when it happens, maybe in a year, maybe in 2 months. We don't know. We don't know. It depends on Scotty. It depends on the team around him. It depends on Nick Nurse, Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster. But these guys will not stifle a superstar the way previous regimes have. They will not literally hold the man down in order to reward loyalty. When he gets to the level where he is unquestionably the best player on this team, it will naturally move towards him. I guess what I'm saying is, did Cade Cunningham have to work to be the best player on the Pistons before they handed him Luka Doncic usage? No. And while a fan base might say, that's great, that's great. Here's my question. If Cade Cunningham had been drafted here, would he be better off? I think he would have. I think he would have. I don't think that they would have put him in the same situation. I think they would have helped him develop a little bit better, brought him along a little bit slower. I think it's okay. It's going to be okay. I really believe that. I truly do. I think that at some point, whatever vision you have for Scotty, whether you think he's going to be the next Magic, the next Kawhi, the next Giannis, if it gets there, it gets there. But I do believe that that day will come. He works entirely too hard. He is not a quitter. Okay. He is not someone who just falls down. And, despite what I might, sometimes feel like, oh my God, all these people are criticizing him. I need to step up for him. Deep down, if I'm being really honest, I know that Scotty Barnes can take that. He can take it all. He can take all the chatter and stuff. It's annoying, probably, for him, but I know that he can take it. He can persevere through that and take early hardships. People, character. It's all about character, guys, right? There are certain people who are just built to overcome things. And in an interesting way, Fred VanVleet and Scotty Barnes are very similar that way. They don't bet. They're not both on the bet on yourself, ilk. They're not cut from that same cloth. But in terms of toughness, in terms of a sort of single-minded approach to greatness, I think they're both very similar. And if they have ever clashed, it may be because they have that thing in common, that they do both want to win. They just have different ideas of how winning is created. Fred VanVleet probably thinks that winning is by him shooting a lot of shots. I don't think that he would be taking all these shots if he necessarily thought that it would lead to losing. But he has an irrational self-confidence, and he always has. And that's why I said before, you take the good with the bad with Fred VanVleet, right? There's good and bad with Scotty Barnes too. So, regardless of which side of the aisle you fall on, you can debate this till you're blue in the face, guys. You can say, okay, well, we should turn the keys over to Scotty. We should turn the keys over to Fred. But try to stop it there. Try to stop it there. Because when we start going into these guys, they have beef, they hate each other, they don't like each other, whatever. I genuinely don't believe that that's true. Like deep down, I think that they both probably have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for each other. It just so happens that they're built to play in slightly different offenses. Okay? So that's where I stand on that. Say what you want about the basketball. Let's just try to keep this, the personal stuff. Let's try to keep it out. DR, look, what the fuck? What? Okay, let me respond to some of these comments. If anyone wants to come on, I'm gonna put the link here as well. But I will try to respond to a few of these comments before I log off here. All right. Okay, we have Alex coming on. Alex, talk to me. What's up? Hello? Is this another person without audio?
Oh, hey Rob.
Hey, what's up?
I just need to mute you on the other window so I don't hear you twice.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So I just want to come on here and just kind of comment on development, and
Sure.
I wanted to comment on how you were saying that Fred takes all these shots because he has this irrational confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and he wouldn't take these shots if he thought it would lead to losses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've just been thinking, but I just been noticing that historically, the Raptors, they've been struggling to develop smart players.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just seems like it's a weakness of their development program.
Sure.
Because when you look at our players historically, they're all from other programs, or they're just smart in general. Like they just came out of the draft as
Kyle
smart
Lowry,
basketball
Marc
players.
Gasol, Kawhi Leonard, Danny Green. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And then the
like
people we developed were basically Chris Boucher, Norman Powell. Yeah, I get you. I understand where you're going with that. Yep.
yeah, like even when you look at Lowry, people say that he developed here in Toronto, but I believe that when it comes to basketball IQ, at least most of it is developed in your formative years,
I agree.
and he developed most of that under Rick Adelman, and that was his like biggest influence, right? Like even when he came to Toronto, when he was playing with Bargs, he was upset at the way that we were playing because there wasn't like the pretty fundamental basketball that he was used to
Mm-hmm.
in Houston, right?
Right.
And that was why he was clashing with Dwayne Casey and stuff like that back then.
Right.
Um, so which brings me to my main point is that how much of it do you think is because a lot of these core guys they grew up playing under Dwayne Casey, and Dwayne Casey had that style of basketball where it was just pound the rock, super into isos, and there's this period of time where Jeff Weltman he had that analytics thing saying, oh, isos are the key to winning in playoff basketball, right? And then they really prioritize that in terms of development.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because if you think about it, the triangle offense forces a lot of isolation, right? If you really think about it, right? There is some motion there, of course, but there's a sense of, being built ideally for good passers and a really strong isolation scorer. Consider Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. These are really strong isolation scorers. They obviously tried the triangle with Carmelo Anthony. Here's the thing. I see your point, and I don't like the job that Dwayne Casey has done in Detroit necessarily. I mean, we're talking Killian Hayes, not great. That's an understatement. I mean, he's turned it on lately, but not great. Cade Cunningham, really not great, right? Who has developed under Dwayne Casey? Can you think of someone? DeMar DeRozan.
Right. But he became like a more complete player, more aware player under Popovich.
He did. But also, it's very difficult to say who became what when, right? I have to say that. It is 100% true. Like right now, we can say that Yuta Watanabe became a better player because Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are more encouraging of role players to score. And I can see that. I can buy that. I know that those guys are way more over themselves in a way, basketball wise, at least, not personally, but basketball wise. And so they may be the type of guys who empower role players to become super role players, like Nick Claxton. Does Nick Claxton become Nick Claxton that he is in Brooklyn here? I don't know. Maybe not, right? Yuta Watanabe, but he credits, if you consider like how many ex-Raptors have burned us lately, right? Yuta Watanabe, right? Jonas Valanciunas kills us, right? Terrence Davis lit us up against Sacramento, right? So you're like, why do all these guys find success somewhere else? Well, the thing about development is it's all about seeds and watering those seeds. There's a very good chance that DeMar never becomes the playmaker he became unless he was already the scorer that he became here, right? You can complete parts of a person's game, but you can't complete what isn't even started, right?
Right. But can't you look at like the history of their culture? Like for instance, Spurs, right? Like
Hmm.
there is Spurs basketball, like the types of shots, like some of the shots that Fred's taking, they're not necessarily the types of shots that Pop would let you get away with, right? So you can say that, oh, like we don't know if it's like the chicken or the egg. Like we don't
Right.
know where it begins and where it starts. I mean, where it ends. But you can also look at a franchise's strong history,
Mhm.
culture, and identity, and be able to pinpoint, like what it is that they're trying to instill in their players, right?
Right. No, I understand, and, like, at the end of the day, if you're trying to develop players, yeah, I definitely suggest a more motion-centric offense and, passing and better ideas and more development, right? Especially if you're taking on as many raw prospects as the Raptors do, right? I get that, right? But at the same time, if you're trying to develop assets specifically, then the numbers, right? If you encourage guys to get a lot of rebounds and put up a lot of points, develop their skills in that sense, I think isolation scores are very valuable trade assets, right? I mean, we develop assets. I think that's kind of what we do as a general basketball philosophy. And then when we're ready to cash those assets in, whether they be future draft picks, whether they be young prospects who are starting to pop, uh, experienced guys who've already popped. Consider, OG Anunoby, right? You turned a 23rd overall pick, right, some time ago, into by through investing, and let's not even pretend, let's not ignore the fact that he's been a very productive player for you over the years, till today, where he could probably get you 3 future firsts and a filler. Like, that's incredible asset management, right?
Yeah, I never really thought about it in those terms.
Well, I mean, think about it. Think about how you got, I mean, we mentioned it in a previous pod, so I don't want to repeat myself, but we do tend, like, when we traded for Marc Gasol and Kawhi Leonard. If you actually look at the points per game, rebounds per game, it's like it's kind of in the favor of the guys we got rid of. We got rid of a lot of that, but we got back a lot of stuff that doesn't show up, like intelligence and defensive awareness, like playoff experience. There's a lot of stuff that we got back, like fit, right? Marc Gasol just fit. Like, we tried for years to turn DeMar DeRozan into something close to Kawhi Leonard. Did we not? I mean, we were never going to get there defensively, but offensively, we were trying. We tried to encourage him to shoot more threes, tried to encourage him to be more of an off-ball spacer, improve his shot diet, improve his efficiency at the rim. We gave him chance after chance to prove that he was more of a playoff scorer, even though he really wasn't, right? All the things that we wanted DeMar to become, Kawhi already was, plus some. Same thing with Jonas Valanciunas, right? If you recall, the year that we traded him, we were trying to get him to develop that three-point shot, stand out more towards the top of the key, because that's the way that the offense had to work, right? So when people say that Nick Nurse can't coach, right, I think the bigger part of this picture is, what is he coaching to do, right? Because if he's coaching to win basketball games on a night-to-night basis, he's probably doing a terrible job. But if that's his only prerogative, then he's doing probably a terrible job. If he's coaching to improve certain players' numbers and improve another set of players' skills while trying to be competitive in the win-loss column, like, we have to factor in that this is not high school, right? There's more at stake than whether a guy wins or loses a game. Like, we have a philosophy, we always have, of playing and developing. Like, case in point, was Delano Banton a better player than Goran Dragic last year?
No.
Okay, of course not, right? Goran Dragic is a regular rotation player in the NBA, and he has been for years. He's an ex-All-Star, and we benched him for Delano Banton, who was probably one of the worst players in the NBA last year, bottom 100. So why do we do that? Why are we starting Christian Coloco? I think, you know, some people complain. Why are we starting Christian Coloco? This guy's the worst starting center in the NBA. Why are we starting him? There has to be a secondary point to this. There has to be a reason for it. They're not stupid, right? Like, they know that Kem Birch is a better player right now to some degree, like more impactful. They know that, they could easily swap a second round pick for an upgrade on Christian Coloco right now, right? But
Right.
he's still playing. He's still starting. Why? Why do you think that is?
I guess it's because he buys into culture a lot more. So going back to like Dragic, right? Like
Hmm.
he didn't really buy in
Okay.
at the beginning. And he wasn't as optimistic about the Raptors.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I don't know how much you believe in what was reported and what wasn't reported.
I speak the language, so I actually heard the actual quote. Yeah.
Okay, so
I
yeah,
mean, my point, my larger point is there's multiple ways to view this from a big picture perspective. Big picture perspective number one, you could say you might be holding Christian Coloco there because you're trying to implement a certain type of defense that he is ideal for. And right now, he's a placeholder for when you get an upgrade of that playstyle. Let me give you an example. What is Christian Coloco really good at?
he's good at he's a deterrent at the rim. He's big. He has
Perfect. He's a
length,
shot blocker, right?
right?
So, and the Raptors are rumored to be going after Miles Turner, Jakob Pertl, both guys who are, guys at the rim, right? So I think the Raptors, there was a quote a few years ago from the Golden State Warriors where they said, "We're just way ahead. We're way ahead we're 10 years ahead." It was something like that. It was like they
Yeah,
said,
streets ahead or something, right?
yeah, I think the Raptors are way ahead in terms of their philosophy in terms of being able to achieve multiple things within the same time frame, right? Because you could look at someone like OG Anunoby and he's progressed slowly, Pascal Siakam, and it's easy to say now, look at what a brilliant job they've done developing them. But how many hitches on the road did we go through, right? Pascal in Tampa, right? Why is this guy playing point guard? He's not a point guard. Now we're seeing. Now we're seeing, you know, and maybe part of that was to implement, to develop his skills. Maybe part of it was a placeholder for what would it look like if we eventually had a super high usage guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo to run the offense that is currently running through Siakam. There has to be there's like I think the Raptors, like I think a lot of teams are playing checkers, right? They're trying to win now to salvage their fan base, right? Because like you consider big markets like LA, New York, they're just trying to eke out wins, and they'll do whatever. They'll trade future draft picks. They'll make rushed, they'll get rid of blue chip prospects if it means like a little bit of an upgrade now. That is never something I can really accuse the Raptors of doing. They always have the eye on the bigger picture. So big picture for Coloco, I think it'd be two-pronged. Number one, you actually want to develop this guy because you think that he has like serious potential down the line. And even if, yes, he's going to spend some time in the G League later on, look at all of this experience now going up against centers. The other thing is, once you actually play against guys a few times, like specific guys, you play different the next time you play them. There's no substitute for actual in-game reps, right?
Right.
Not the G League, not watching film, not playing 2K, there's no substitute for literally having to hold off Nikola Jokic and getting killed. The Raptors have put Christian Coloco out there like way before he was ready to do anything like this. And there has to be some sort of vision to why you would do that right now. Is it costing you wins? Probably, yeah. The analytics would say it is. The analytics would say if you replace Christian Coloco with a like a regular league average starting center, you're probably a winning team right now. Instead of 3 games under 500, you might actually be like a game over or at 500. That's how big a difference it's making. A lot of analytics have him as the worst Raptor. I don't think he is, but it's close, right? And you have to question why he's starting. And a lot of people are starting to question why he's starting. And I think a lot of people might question why Scotty Barnes is taking threes, right? It's imperative. There has to be some bigger pipeline. I think a lot of people have the development philosophy of we're just going to make guys do what they're good at because that's what helps us win now, right? Okay, well, what's Scotty good at? Okay, well, driving to the rim and posting up, that's all he's good at. Okay, but until he starts making those threes on a consistent basis, he's never going to unlock all that passing potential. And so you have to be able to develop and win. There's a thin line in the middle, right? Now, in terms of the basketball IQ thing that you're talking about, yeah, I think that comes down to system and philosophy. I really do believe that if you got another coach in who didn't have the directive to have to develop, he would, within one training camp, fix 80% of the issues that you see in this offense, from movement to all that stuff. I've seen so many teams that were super isocentric. They got a new coach, and suddenly they're like, there's a lot of movement in their offense, right?
Yeah, so I understand that argument, right? Like, I understand that when you want to, like, if you're trying to develop, you can't necessarily min-max your players and just get them to do what they're good at.
Right.
But at the same time, don't you think it takes away from that strategy when you have guys that don't really buy in and they're trying to get their numbers up, they're trying to, you know, play like their own philosophy? Like there's certain guys on the team who think that doing things a certain way will lead to more wins. And it's not necessarily, the type of philosophy that you're talking about where they're acting as a placeholder, so to speak,
Well,
into
what
the
if they
grand
are?
scheme of things.
Like what if, the long-term play for the Raptors is to target, an upgraded version, or to even turn, like, you're trying to develop all these pieces to fit into your grander vision of what you'll look like when you contend. That's what Masai Ujiri's always said. We never want to be in no man's land. We care about championships. Okay, well, I think we can probably all agree that this is not a championship core unless Scotty Barnes becomes a top 5 player and all these guys maintain a certain level and some younger guys pop. Like, there just is such a seismic gap between where we are right now, even where we'll be at the end of the year, and the top teams in the league like Boston, Milwaukee, etc. Right? So right now, maybe there's a move, right? Like, I made a video. It was like the Raptors are currently building around Kevin Durant because, I mean, we saw it last night. We saw on one side, we saw Pascal Siakam start at the top of the key, right? We saw him drive at Kevin Durant and Nick Claxton and miss a wild layup. And on the other side, I think it was 2 plays later, we saw Kevin Durant do the exact same thing and just get right to the basket, right? These are comparable players in terms of play style. Yeah, there's a change in diet, but in terms of usage, in terms of, the pieces around them, these are pieces you can swap, right? So, you know, um, what is the play? I don't know. Maybe there's a player we're targeting. Maybe there's a player we're trying to develop into something. But I'm just saying that it's not just about game to game losses. There has to be a bigger plan in play for the Raptors. I feel like I'm going in circles here. So I guess, yeah. Unless you have something else to add.
No, not really. But
Okay.
I just want to say I'm a huge fan of what you're doing, and this is great.
Thank you so much, Alex. Cheers. Okay, we're gonna end it. I just wanted to, as a parting note, I just want to say that if I have contributed to anything that is negative, that has, contributed to people not liking a certain player personally, if I have myself have veered into the territory of out of bounds with the personal stuff, I promise I will stop. I promise. This is like, if I have gone there, I will not go there. I will stop. Okay. Including the media stuff, right? I've been a little bit frustrated with the media, and I called a few of those guys out personally. And I think that, maybe that's out of bounds too, because now they're getting some heat on their Twitter, and some of you guys are going over on their Twitter and firing them up and stuff. And now they hate me. That's not really my point. I guess the point here is I need to grow up a little bit, right? Oh, there's Ayub. Hey, Ayub, what's up?
Hey, what's up? What's up? Yeah, I just wanted to come in, talk a little bit
Mhm.
about the situation that we're in right now. Personally,
Sure.
honestly, it's a little bit frustrating, but at the same time, I understand like these things usually do happen in the NBA season. But on the flip side, like we see like a lot of our players are kind of going through struggles at the same time, and that's like the
Mhm.
biggest issue. And like players feed off each other's energy, and
Mhm.
often when one player is kind of sulking and on the court, kind of throwing up their hands and not really passing the ball, dribbling it out, and Fred VanVleet's are an example of that. And I feel like it's kind of destroying the team, and I feel like the team's like it's not done. Like people are kind of looking around saying like, "Oh, like this is the end. The season's done. Trade everyone." I don't think it's that bad just yet, but
Okay.
I feel like a lot of the issues can be fixed with like some chemistry issues. Some players need to be like this title like of Fred helping Scotty. Like that's like a good like a positive thing for me. like these players kind of like going in the back end, helping each other out, and building that relationship on the back end in practice and putting that
Right.
on court. I feel like that's like the biggest, you know.
Here's the thing, right? And for sure, like I was critical of Siakam early into the season, right? I kind of made a point about he's not a top 5 player, right?
Right,
People started coming into the comments and accusing me of being a Siakam hater. They're like, "Oh my God, you're hating on Siakam, right?"
right.
The problem with that, though, is I became so irritated by those guys saying that I started to double down on it. Now it became a talking point, right?
Right.
So here's what I'm saying.
Hmm.
Like, what if all of this Fred versus Scotty stuff leaks into the locker room? I mean, these guys are all reading it. They're all watching it, right? These are all talking points on every forum right now. Every single one you look at. Does Fred hate Scotty? Does Scotty hate playing with Fred?
Yeah.
So,
They
you
have
know, like it's like these guys are looking at each other maybe a little bit different now. Like, who are you talking to? Who's talking to who, right?
right.
And that's what I don't want to be a part of. If I have been a part of it, and I'm positive that if I go back and look at some of my videos, I'm like, shit, I broke a rule there and there and there. So I want to be better from this point on. I'm not changing the direction of this channel, from being honest.
Okay.
I just don't want to go there. It's like talking about players' mothers, you know, on the court. You might want to go at a guy, but you don't talk about their mother, right? Like that's out of bounds. So this is out of bounds. I think talking about guys off the court, you know, like that they're, you know, like that they don't like each other and stuff like that. I think that's it's dicey and you know, doesn't help. To the point that you made about players feeding off of each other, I completely agree. Who do you think are the 2 strongest personalities in the Raptors locker room?
Fred and Siakam.
Siakam?
I
Really?
think, I really think like in the recent years, like he's not like that vocal, but I feel like his play and his ball dominance and his kind of leader of the team and everyone kind of looking at up from the outside of the league, looking in, seeing Siakam is our best player. I feel like that's
Right.
kind of boosted his status within the locker room. But I do
Right.
agree that like Dad and like Fred are kind of probably the most like veteran type of like most cool headed players usually.
Sure. I think like so just my read on it, I think the strongest personalities in the locker room are Scotty and Fred.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. Personality wise, yeah, I agree with you actually.
Like in terms of just people who are just unflinchingly themselves. Like they're going to be themselves no matter what, you know what I mean?
When you put it
And
like
I think that leads to possibly like, you know, one side and the other and they're very different people, right? So, I think if one of those guys is not going right, it has a greater ripple impact on the others.
oh, okay, yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah, that's a good
Like have you ever met somebody who walks into a room and suddenly the room changes?
yeah, instantly the
You met
vibe.
those guys, right?
Yeah,
Exactly, right? And they're just there's a presence to that person, and I can tell you that that was one of the things that almost anyone who's ever met Scotty would tell you. It's like when he goes into a room, the vibe of that room changes.
right.
Fred's probably got a very similar energy to him. Like he's just there's a stoic power to him, you know, very very commanding presence, right? So you have 2 of these guys, and if one of them is not going right, for like, you know, for the instance, like the hand up sulking, that's a lot of Scotty, right?
Yeah.
Ball dominance, a lot of Fred, you know, and I think a lot of complaining, that's Nick Nurse, right? Complaining to the refs. And I think maybe if all 3 of those guys could do a little bit less of what they're doing, right? If Scotty can be a little bit more forgiving of the tunnel vision and, you know, he doesn't have to be so animated about the stuff because people are picking up on that, they're feeding on that, right? And Fred can be a little bit more compassionate to his teammates who maybe are cutting and are a little bit, you know, demanding the ball. And Nurse can just realize that once he starts complaining to the refs, everyone starts complaining to the refs. You see it. The minute he does it, suddenly Siakam's doing it, Fred's doing it, Scotty's doing it. Now Scotty complains to the refs so much now. And I don't remember that being a thing about him before. But it's like, you know, you're setting a culture. So I think you're right. I think, you know, everyone needs to improve here. But yeah, you have any final points here?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, yeah, like the situation I don't think is like completely dead. Like I feel like we can still recover and still kind of
So here's my question for you. I do have a question for you. So we're 3 games under 500. We are facing a boatload of playoff teams. We haven't done our big Western Conference road trip yet.
Yeah.
Okay. And OG Anunoby is still expected to be out tomorrow, right? And maybe Otto and Precious aren't due back until January now. So help and the reinforcements that we're looking for maybe aren't there. And barring a trade, what's your best case scenario for the Raptors finish this year in terms of placement in the Eastern Conference?
Well, yeah, okay. So I would say the best case scenario right now, as is looking with all the injuries that we're having and all the injuries we've been having throughout the season,
Hmm.
is I feel like if we have like some serious development for Scotty, that's
Hmm.
a big positive throughout the season that I can take away. Even if like we don't have like a big trade, a big positive that would be uh, kind of developing Scotty. That's one, right?
Hmm.
Also, I feel like
But in terms of placing, where are you placing us in the East? Like,
I
what's
feel
your
like
best case scenario?
best case scenario for position seventh, eighth.
Seventh. So
Yeah,
play in.
yeah,
You remember Masai Ujiri? Play in for what? Play in for what? Right? Look,
yeah.
the Raptors' stated objective for this year was second round or bust.
Mm.
That was the stated objective. And I hate to say it, but in order to get to the second round,
Mm.
barring a miracle or an injury,
Yeah.
you have to finish top 5. You
Yeah,
have to.
I don't
Top
see
6.
that. I do not see that.
Because some people think, someone wrote in the comment, okay, so I'm gonna fire off a bunch of teams for you, and you tell me if you had to bet $1,000 of your
Yeah.
own money if you would
Okay.
pick the Raptors against this team, right? Or just tell me which team you would pick in a 7-game series
Right.
if you had to bet. Okay, $1,000 of your money on the line.
Okay.
Boston.
No shot. I'm not
So
betting.
so Boston Raptors,
Yeah,
you're picking Boston.
yeah. I'm Boston all the time.
Okay, Bucks Raptors,
Bucks,
Cavs Raptors.
Cavs.
Okay, that's 3 teams already,
Yeah.
right? And 3 teams that are expected to finish in the top 5.
Yeah.
Right? Nets, Raptors.
Nets. I hate
That's
this
4.
word. Nets. Yeah.
That's 4, right?
It's looking
Hawks, Raptors.
bad. That one I can see more of a toss up, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we lost that one. I'm be perfectly honest. That would go like for me that would go to like a game 7, and like we somehow choke that, and I wouldn't be surprised. So I'll take.
Okay. Knicks, Raptors.
Okay, no, that's too far. I say I stop it there. The Raptors got
Okay.
that
So the Knicks are not going to finish top 3.
for sure.
So there's no chance in hell you're going to face them in the first round.
Yeah.
And almost every team that is likely to finish at the top of the conference, you don't really have a shot against in the 7-game series. And it might be not even close, right?
Yeah.
Boston, like that's sweep territory with the way that team is going.
Yeah.
It could be a 6-game series max, right? So my thing is you needed to get off to a really hot start.
Mhm.
You needed to get out of the gate fast. That was your big competitive advantage. It tends to be the way for certain teams bringing on like rookies and teams that are gelling a lot of new pieces. They tend to figure it out in the second half of the season. So teams like the Hawks, who are having to work out this me first, you first offense with DeJounte and Trey, I think they're going to be better in the second half of the season once they figure that out. The Cavs, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, I think they're going to be much better in the second half. I can't believe people are sleeping on the Cavs. They're
They're
so
really
good. Like
They're really
on paper and in reality, they're good.
Yeah.
So I think there are 4 clear teams that are just going to beat us. The Nets.
I have a question for you though.
Yeah. What's up?
So last year we saw like kind of like a similar horrible start. We started off slow as well. And
Yeah.
in the second half of the season, we did pick up a lot. And we kind of made that push for 5th place.
Yes, we did.
So do you think like that's even a possibility for this season?
Well, basically last year you added Thad, and that was a huge help, right? You stopped playing Delano Banton. That was also pretty much a huge help. But this year you might just end up getting Precious and Otto back. Like that's almost like your midseason addition, and or you might be able to make some move, upgrade, sell a pick, from 2025 pick or something, and get Jakob Poeltl or something like that. So that's possible. My question is, do any of those guys put you over the edge against the teams that I mentioned?
No.
Not really, right?
No.
They make you better. They might help you win in the regular season, but in a 7-game series, I don't think those guys are moving the needle much for you because I don't think those guys are going to be on the court very much for you to the end of the game, right? So I think the Raptors are deeper than people realize. I really do. Just because the bench doesn't play very much doesn't mean I don't have a lot of belief in a lot of guys on this bench. But I think at some point you have to just do the math if you're the Raptors and just say, if we lose, like, if we fall 6 games under 500,
right?
Like right now, what are we at? 3?
Yeah, 3 games.
3 games under 500. I say around 5 games under 500, you're starting to get into play-in best possible outcome territory, right?
Mhm.
Which is officially no man's land. That should be the definition of no man's land, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't know what the Raptors do in that case, because you have a lot of guys. You can't shut anyone down. This is not like the, David Robinson situation where he had an injury and they were just like, you know what, just sit it out. Like, just take a little bit more time to rest, because Fred VanVleet's not going to do that. Pascal Siakam, these guys are all in contract, negotiation years. They got to put up big numbers. They got to put up big stats. And this is not shade on those guys. It's just the business of the NBA.
Yeah.
Fred VanVleet is not going to be able to approach the negotiating table with the Toronto Raptors without a competing offer. If the Raptors know there's no other teams competing for his services because he just put up 12 points per game on half a season at 35%,
Yeah.
he's gonna have to accept like $15 million or some crazy amount like that. So I think you have to trade. Like, trades are your only way out of this.
Okay.
Once you get into that territory, it has to be a trade,
Right.
in my opinion.
No.
Because if you end up in the play-in, like, you're just going for and to compare last year and this year, I just want to say the expectations last year were to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Play-in would have been acceptable last year.
Yeah.
That would have been success because you were starting a rookie. He's a really big part of your future going forward. I think that's acceptable. But this year, I don't think that's acceptable.
Yeah. Okay. No, I agree. And honestly, it does look a little grim. Like, this season does look grim. And without the trades that you're talking about, yeah, like I was just talking in terms of this season, but like, yeah, just thinking ahead and like the future, like there's not much what's going to go on. The contract years coming up, like Gary Trent's playing for his contract as well. And like his contract's coming up soon. So yeah, I feel like it's all looking bad, but yeah, that's all I really wanted to say.
Thanks a lot, Ayub. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, Ayub. Yeah. You're saying.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. First time caller. Loved it. It's a great discussion.
Yeah, for
Thanks
sure.
so much, man.
Bye.
See you. Final caller of the day will be Gil. Hey, Gil. How are you?
What's going on, Rob? Doing well?
I'm good. Long time no chat. What's up?
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on something you said with the call with Ayub there. That the Raptors I think they are deep. That's the thing. Like, I think they have pretty good players. Like you mentioned how Achua and Otto Porter would return. I think they have, some pretty decent depth if you really look at it. Like, if Nick Nurse actually plays the guys, and me personally, I think Scotty Barnes, like, once he gets a bit healthier, like, because I still do think there's some lingering issues there.
We have 2 games in a row where he hasn't come up limping, and they've both been really good games. Does anyone find that to be a coincidence? Because I don't.
Yeah, exactly. I think, honestly, maybe call me, super optimistic, but I can see him taking a step during the season, kind of like how, Siakam last year when he returned.
Yeah,
took him a bit
I
to get
called
going.
it. I called it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I don't know why I did it necessarily. There might have been, some sort of inkling of information, but I said, give it till mid-December. He's going to turn his season around. And it's like December 14th, December 16th. I'm like, man, this guy is like clockwork. Like, no, I agree. But so I guess my follow-up to that would be, okay, Scotty takes a step, right? To what though? Like, does he become like a 20-point per game scorer? Like, is he at least on the scoring level? Is he like OG? Like, you have another OG offensively with like more passing, or you're seeing it like what we saw last night is about to unlock like, like third year Jason Tatum.
Yeah, no, I don't think that. I mean, that would be awesome, but I just don't see it because of the the usage of the other guys on the team. But in terms of his just overall assertiveness, I think he's going to just start asserting himself and really start to demand the ball. And and since he is such a great passer, he's going to find guys. I think, honestly, like, if the offense were to like run through his decision making, I think it would be really, really good for everybody, including Fred, right? Because it'll free him up to actually get better looks. Siakam wouldn't have to force his shots too much, even though he's a pretty good ISO scorer. Same thing for OG. Find him in the short corner or at the top of the key or anything. I just think it'll be a lot more fluid, and for him and his confidence in his future, I think it'll just the ceiling of this team, in my opinion, rests on his development. So
I don't disagree with that. I think that's a great point. I just think that, like, look, I have been very bullish on Scotty. Obviously, I think that's a pretty big understatement, to be honest.
Yeah.
I basically am, someone would say a fanboy, someone would say a cheerleader for Scotty. I'm a very big fan of his, and I love his passing, right? And when it was high school, like the passing that we saw from him with the Knight Riders, like in the EYBL, like some of the passes he was throwing in grade school, like wow, he was such an incredible player, and he's become a slightly different player in the NBA. But oftentimes with young players, what we see is a glimpse, in early AAU ball. We see the type of player they can be based on the competition they're going up against, and then they go to the NBA, and that player kind of evaporates for a bit until they reemerge, right?
Yeah.
And I think that part of the thing that I touched on earlier was Scotty's ability to score will unlock his ability to pass, right? So yes, in a vacuum, if we did a test, we said, hey, dribble a ball and make this pass as accurately as possible, provided it's not All-Star Weekend, because Scotty doesn't, do too well in these All-Star Weekend events. But if we just ask these guys to throw passes and or put objects in their peripheral vision and said who sees it first, in a lab test, Scotty Barnes is, like, in my opinion, a better passer than Fred VanVleet and a better passer than anyone on this team. And it's very
Absolutely.
exciting to see some of the passes he can throw, right?
Yeah.
But when you really start to look at the passes he's generating, it's only like some of the best ones come after he gets an advantage on the defense. And it's
Mhm.
usually the best case would be the no look pass to Christian Coloco two games ago,
Yeah.
right? That was incredible. But if you freeze that pass, he's looking at the rim. That's how he drew the second defender, right?
Exactly.
So when Scotty can collapse a defense the way that, I mean, this might be very hot takey, but if he could ever do some version of what James Harden and Giannis do,
Oof.
where they go down the middle,
Yeah.
I think that his physical profile will make him unstoppable in that situation. And also the counter to that, because defenses will always go and make you do something that you don't want to do, right?
Mhm.
Right now, defenses know he can pass. So they're reluctant to double him, because if you double him, he's going to find the open player, right? Why? And I think that that's the point here. You need to be able to punish the teams who won't double so that everyone has to double. Because the point of an offense is not to get Fred VanVleet stats or to get Scotty stats. It's to generate points.
Exactly.
Every offensive set is generated to maximize points. So if you knew that a certain play has been run with like 62% efficiency, you would run that play until the other team stopped it if you were a smart basketball team.
Exactly.
So Scotty Barnes rolling into the post against a smaller defender, and or Scotty Barnes taking a bigger defender off the bounce and just going straight to the basket. These types of plays, and as an on-ball player, on-ball offense, these types of plays need to force a second defender for us to be successful with him
Bro, let me
as a
ask you a
first
question.
option. Sure.
Do you think, like, knowing all that what you just said, like, how is it possible for us, outside of, I know the reason why, so it's kind of I'm just trying to, like, get deeper here with the thought of this. How is it that with all the players that we have and with Scotty Barnes' skill set, how are we such a terrible half court offense? Because I think it could work, right? I just looking at the players that we have, including some of the guys off the bench,
Mhm.
we could have a way better half court offense than we currently have right now.
Um, at the risk of repeating myself, because I definitely have touched on this before, but I'll try to phase it in a way, because I know that some of the people who listen to this have already listened to previous ones, and I don't want to alienate them by repeating myself. But um, if you look at good offenses around the NBA, right? If you were to freeze it 3 seconds before the score, it's not usually obvious where the points are going to come from, right? Like last night, how many different attack points did the Nets show off against us, right?
Yeah,
Kyrie Irving has basically blitzed us in second halves. I think he's averaging something ridiculous this season, like 21 points per game in second halves against the Raptors.
yeah,
It's
it's something
ridiculous,
crazy.
right? And very efficiently, by the way, may I add, right? Well, it happens because there has to be something to pressurize the defense into creating gaps for the offense, right? And right now there aren't. So consider, yesterday we had Yuta Watanabe in one corner. You had maybe Joe Harris flaring out to the top, and then you had Kevin Durant sort of demanding some attention in the post, and then Kyrie is able to attack weak side, right?
Yeah.
And if the defense responds to that, which they will, because he can get past his man, right, and collapse the defense, he has a corner pass to Yuta Watanabe. If that defender isn't paying attention to him, he can always reset to the top and get Joe Harris a clean look. He could probably throw an alley-oop to Nick Claxton, who's probably hanging around in the dunker spot. Or maybe by this point, Kevin Durant has left the post in order to clear space for Kyrie drive, and now he's relocated to the. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so much that within, like, if you go to the point of the score and you rewind 3 seconds, it's not usually obvious who is going to score for a lot of good teams, right?
Exactly.
Because there is a lot of assists within good offenses. However, with the Raptors, it is very obvious. And if you want my honest opinion, predictability and a lack of space and a lack of talent are why the Raptors are where they are offensively.
Yeah, I mean, it's two of the things we can. It's in the team's control. Like the lack of talent thing, we have no control over that.
Well, talent and spacing go hand in hand, right? Well, I mean, okay, so here's the thing: lineups, right? Certain lineups, like last night. I don't think it's an accident. I touched on it in the last night's pod, but like that Malachi Flynn created a little bit more spacing than most of the other guys, because the scouting report on Malachi Flynn is 48% 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
Right? That's a guy you have to guard. Second part is, like, consider the gap between Otto Porter and Malachi, right? Who is more likely to take a 3-pointer, not make? Because yes, on his career, you could say Otto Porter is probably a better 3-point shooter, but he's not very like aggressive offensively, to use a nurse term, right? He's kind of like an off-ball spacer who's very comfortable being a 4th or 5th option. It's not someone who's always going to punish you the second he touches it. But when you have guys like that, if you look at last year, it was a very fascinating thing. Out of passes, right? Gary Trent was the least willing yet most effective passer on this team last year, if I remember the numbers correctly. And I think most people will be shocked to hear that. And by that, I mean, how well do people shoot off of assists that they receive from a particular player? It was incredible, the percentages that people were seeing on Gary. What does Gary do really well? He collapses defenses. It almost always, in most cases, when people assume that when he gets the ball and he takes 2 dribbles, the defense always has a reaction to it, because A, he can make a lot of shots, he can get it going in a hurry. B, they're not playing him for the pass. He's such a predictably like obvious guy that's going to score, that when he actually does pass, it's such a set off for the defense that it almost catches them off guard. So I think in that situation, you're getting away with a guy just being very ball dominant and very, I don't want to call him a chucker, but kind of like a chucker, that he's just never going to pass. So when he does pass it, it's almost like Gary Trent passing has the same effect as Kyrie Irving passing,
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it creates a gap. So, in order to address the offense, and so like, in order to exploit the matchups, right? Like, if you just think about it, like, imagine you have a 4 out, like a 5, like four guys, okay, 5 out, and you attack from the top, right? Well, if the other team is packing the paint and they collapse the defender, well, you have like open shooters everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But if you have even one non-shooter on the court, the whole thing doesn't work. It's just slightly less effective, because there's one guy who can sort of midway between the paint and his man. And if he knows that you're, like, for instance, Scotty Barnes, right? Now, I've been very reluctant to be super critical of him because he's a young player, but there was a game where he just kept passing. Like, no matter what, he got the ball and he just like passed it off really quick. And I don't know if it was health or what it was, but in that game, he's not helping his team. By not looking to score, you actually like completely destroying your offense, because by being an unwilling shooter, like if you're a guy who just keeps passing up shots that are just good shots, this is something that Scotty Barnes has to get out of, because he does it a lot.
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
you are actually making it so much harder for the other 4 guys to score, right?
Exactly, because it's like 5-on-4 almost.
It is. So there's like one guy, like even guys like, maybe we, in a vacuum, we look at a particular player and we say, this guy's shooting, I don't know, 32% from 3. Why is he taking so many threes? Well, unfortunately, it's because the defense keeps leaving him open from there. because they don't think that he's going to make them, right? And the more he doesn't take them, the more of a liability he becomes for the offense. Because
Exactly.
if you can't make them and you won't take them, well, now you're really screwing over the other 4 guys, and you probably shouldn't be playing, right? Or you should be playing in a different part of the court. Like if Ben Simmons is initiating your offense, it's great. But if somebody else is initiating the offense and Ben Simmons is anywhere else on the court other than the dunker spot, that his man doesn't have to guard him.
I think the
So
game
now
you were
the
talking
other,
about.
pardon?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the game you were talking about where Scotty was passing off a lot was the first game against Orlando in that doubleheader, the back-to-back. He would just pass, like you said, just for the, I don't know, for the sake of passing, I guess. I don't know what happened, but there was a lot of times, like exactly, like it kills the offense because
Right.
what it does is it forces the other players to take more contested shots or just more forced plays when you're not willing to take that, and then it's gonna, it's just not gonna help your overall efficiency. So
absolutely.
I
I mean,
think
like if you think about it,
schematically,
go ahead. Sorry, like speed counteracts space.
exactly.
Like so, like for instance, like Fred VanVleet just going into his shot sooner last night. We saw it. Like he just went into his move sooner. Scotty Barnes, like them picking him up way further out. Both of these things were an antidote for the space issues. The space issues still exist. Pascal Siakam, not a great 3-point shooter. Thaddeus Young, not a great 3-point shooter. Christian Koloko hasn't made a 3 all season. We play a lot of what Fred VanVleet calls funky lineups, and I get that, right? Scotty Barnes, not a guy that people are really running out to for 3 unless it's from a particular corner. I get that, right? Yeah. So all of these things are going to kill your spacing, and if Fred VanVleet dribbles the ball, that's going to actually make that spacing issue worse. So I sometimes look at it like when I'm breaking down a game, I look at it from a spacing meter, right? So 100 is like maximum spacing, and 0 is like literally you play like 4 Rudy Goberts, like the worst spacing ever, right?
Yeah.
And spacing changes based on movement, based on, action, based on, a guy driving to the basket. The spacing changes. And so you always want to look, like when I'm breaking down games, it's like always look at what was the spacing meter at when the shot was taken or when the move to take the shot was taken. Because if you're Nick Nurse or Trevor Gleason, what you should do is find an antidote or find a way to create spacing with players who don't necessarily create space.
Yeah.
Your offense can create more spacing. One way you can create space, in my opinion, is to run in transition.
Well, that, means that they're forcing turnovers and, that's kind of contingent on them forcing.
Doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, they do that a lot. I mean, they're one of the best, fast break scoring teams in the league, but I think I'm not going to get on them too much nowadays in terms of the spacing and stuff because of just a lack of bodies and lack of shooting that, like for instance, Gary Trent, OG, Otto Porter, these guys are not in the lineup. So I'll be fascinated to watch once they're all available, if some of these things are remedied, and if not, then we can have real discussions about their philosophies on offense.
Cool. I have a final question for you, I guess, before we end this live. Thanks so much, Gil. My question for you is, what is your best case scenario for finish for the Raptors this season?
Oh man, best case. So we can go as illogical as possible. So let me say, best case scenario, Scotty Barnes elevates into an all-star type of player. And the team really starts to pick up some momentum in terms of, just chemistry, and all the guys avoid major injuries, and they get a top 5 seed. That would be my best.
Top 5 seed. So 5th is your best case outcome?
Yeah, that's best case. So obviously it's not the.
What about the worst case?
Worst case is they are hampered with injury problems, and it gets progressively worse. Their offense is out of whack, and they just finish a bottom 13 in the East, and they get a lottery pick. That's the worst case.
I don't think that's the worst case at all.
What do you think?
I think the worst.
You think it could get worse than that?
Oh no! I think the worst case scenario would be to finish, I want to say 7th or 8th,
Yeah,
right?
I see what you're saying there.
And get bounced in one of those play-in games.
Yeah, that would be
I
worse.
think that would be pretty much the worst, because you technically did get into the playoffs, but then you still have a lottery pick, but it's not a good lottery pick.
Yeah, I get. Yeah,
Like, I always look at teams who are, because it's like you would rather be the team that gets to at least 8 than the team that finishes 9th. I always
That's
look at
true.
every team that finishes 9th, and I'm like, that's the biggest loser every year. I always like the worst team in the league and the best team in the league have both won, in my opinion.
No, that's true.
So,
Because you're stuck in no
to some
man's
extent,
land at 9th, right?
exactly. 9th is the worst place you can be, in my opinion. To finish 9th, and this play-in tournament, of course, makes that far more complicated, because it's very possible that the team that finishes 7th finishes 9th. But I think that's the worst place that the Raptors could be, and I think there's some very realistic and unfortunate possibility, due to health, due to injuries, due to chemistry, due to whatever you want to talk about, that they could be that team, right?
Quick question before you wrap up.
Sure.
Sorry. Do you think we're worse than the Bulls?
When fully healthy, no, I don't. I think Nikola Vucevic is like a really big liability, and I think DeMar DeRozan's having like pretty much a career year as far as the analytics go. Zach LaVine's a hell of a talent, but Lonzo Ball's not healthy. I don't know. I don't think so. No, I don't think the Bulls are better than us. I don't think the Heat are necessarily better than us. They're having a down year, obviously. But as I recounted with Ayush, the previous caller, Ayub, sorry. If I go down the list of teams that are expected to make the playoffs, like the Boston Celtics, would you pick? Okay, I'll play the same game with you to close this out. I'll give you 2 teams. You tell me which team would win in a 7-game series, if you don't mind, just off the top. If you had to put money on it, not Homer bias or anything like a Raptor bias, but Boston, Toronto.
We got swept.
Okay, Toronto, Milwaukee.
Raptors losing 5.
Okay, it's getting a little bit better. Raptors, Nets.
Oh, man. Nets would win, but I don't. Yeah, the Nets would win. I don't know. Maybe they can squeeze out a couple wins.
So Nets in 6.
Yeah,
Nets in 5 or 6. Okay. Raptors, Cavs.
That's more of a. I think Cavs are criminally underrated. They would win. I would favor them, even though people will say, "Oh, look at the regular season." No, it doesn't matter. Playoffs are way different. So yeah, Cavs probably in 6.
Cavs in 6. Okay, see, it's getting more competitive. Hawks.
I think the Raptors would beat them. I'm
Easily,
not sold on them. No, not easily. Probably in a 6 or 7 game series. I'm not sold on the Hawks at all.
Okay, so a tight series against the Hawks.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, who else am I missing here?
I don't even have the standings. Let me see.
East standings, NBA. So right now we have the Sixers. Oh my God, how did I forget the Sixers? We got beat by them last time. Yeah. Okay, the Sixers Tyrese Maxey, James Harden, Joel Embiid, and this time they have PJ Tucker, who I think, could be an interesting matchup. Matisse Thybulle on the bench. They added a huge upgrade to the bench. Shake Milton playing really well. They actually, stayed somewhat afloat without some key guys out, and Tyrese Maxey's out right now. I think their record is probably very underrated. Yeah, they've gone through a lot of injuries.
Yeah, they have. They've had a lot to key guys too. So
okay, so Sixers, Raptors.
Yeah, I have a friend that's a Sixers fan, and he hates PJ Tucker. So I don't know. Like he can't stand him. But yeah, I think the Sixers would win. Unfortunately, I hate them, but yeah, the talent gap is just too big.
Okay, so we officially have 5 teams: Knicks, Raptors. Okay, Heat, Raptors. Jimmy buckets, Kyle Lowry, Bam Adebayo.
Maybe a hot take, but I'd take the Raptors over them.
Okay, Hawks. You've already said Pacers, Raptors. You take Raptors, right?
Yeah, I take the Raptors over them.
Okay, I think what you're saying basically, because given how this season is going to shake out, in my opinion, it's very expected that the Celtics and Bucks, in whatever order, are going to finish 1-2. The Cavs and Nets are sort of starting to get separation for that 3-4 spot. And they've both dealt with injuries, right? Jared Allen is that defense. Like, people can talk all they want about Evan Mobley. I think Jared Allen anchors that defense.
Clearly.
So you have that, right? So you have 4 teams. The Sixers have been ravaged by injuries. Sorry, you have the Nets as well, and they're finally picking up momentum. Ben Simmons, if he starts to come back to himself, Nick Claxton growing, there's a lot of, talent there. Yuta Watanabe has been a huge, huge addition for those guys. So provided those teams finish top 5, like if our best case scenario is to finish 6th, like to basically we go on a big run and we beat the Knicks out, right? Because right now, like, they're 3 games ahead of us. That's not a huge gap. I mean, even if you think about, the Bucks, it's not a huge gap, but we have a hard schedule. I would feel very differently about this entire situation if we had maybe even a league average schedule.
We have the 5th hardest.
Yes, 5th hardest schedule. And I mean, again, like I think sometimes these hardest schedule, easiest schedule things, they may be a little bit misleading, because I'm pretty sure that the Orlando Magic, 2 games against them, that was part of our easy part. Yeah. Unfortunately, we played them right as they got hot. Do you realize they beat the Boston Celtics in Boston yesterday?
Yeah. I was watching
so,
that.
So in 4 games, they have beat the Clippers, the Raptors, and they beat the Orlando Magic. I believe they beat another team in the meanwhile. No, did they? I think they're on a 5-game win streak. Why do I think that? Anyways, they are balling right now. So meeting that team at that point versus meeting that team earlier in the season, but in terms of strength of schedule, right? So maybe Golden State counts as a really hard team, but we're playing Golden State without Steph Curry. I don't know if strength of schedule adjusts for players being out or in the lineup or how a team is playing. I think this thing should probably adjust on a day-to-day basis, but then it's really hard to project 3 months out. So, but in theory, we haven't done our very tough Western Conference road trip. We haven't done a lot of like really tough opponents that we have coming up. And we were the team that was supposed to get out of the gates soonest. So I think in terms of expectation versus reality, I think we were probably supposed to be, if I'm reading the cards correctly in terms of what management was hoping for, probably around 4 or 5 games over 500 right now. And yet we are 3 games under 500. So we are underperforming by 4 wins in terms of our expectation of being a top 4 seed, so we can avoid some of those teams. And as you are saying, you don't pick us in a series against the Sixers. So, like, it's a very good chance you get to 4 and get beaten by 5, but at least you have home court advantage, which I think is a plus for MLSE too, right?
It is. Money-wise,
Of course. So I think that we are probably 3 losses and no wins. Like, if we fall to 6 games under 500, that is officially time to just pull the plug.
Yeah, I would say as much, for sure.
Yeah, because I think we saw a very desperate team come out yesterday. Very desperate. It looked desperate. The energy, everything. It's like from the jump. They were just like, we got to go. We got to go. We got to get this.
Yeah, they played really well. They just had a stretch in the third that kind of,
But tomorrow night, you're playing against a team that takes a lot of threes and has a defender, in my opinion. If Draymond Green is playing tomorrow, I haven't checked the injury report, but if he's playing tomorrow, like, he's stopping somebody. He's forcing somebody into a very bad game. It might be Fred, it might be Scotty, it might be Pascal, but someone is going to have an off night because of Draymond Green. And if Jordan Poole, who is just so shifty off the bounce, and they're big athletes like Jonathan Kuminga, defensively can force some issues for us. Klay Thompson can get hot. I don't know. It's a toss-up tomorrow. That's a sad thing. No Steph Curry. It's still a toss-up.
Yeah, it is.
So I think if we go 3 games under 500, I don't see any reason to not pull the plug on this season. And I know that's very hot take. How can you? And everyone's going to talk about the talking points of this is exactly where we were last year. Guys, that was last year. Expectations were totally different. Yeah. Expectations were different. Strength of schedule was completely different. Who came into the lineup, who was out of the lineup, the growth curve. Like, are we not sure right now? Like, okay, Pascal Siakam came out of the season like blitzing, right? Here's something I will tell you about Pascal Siakam. I have never seen him put a full good season together. Start to finish, really good. I've never seen it. I saw him put a really good season to start, and then we went into the bubble and it ended disastrously.
Went off a cliff.
right? And then the next year in Tampa, sort of similar situation.
Yeah.
Last year, sort of similar situation. He turned it on late, but in the beginning, it wasn't so great. You know, he came in, we lost 4 games, our defense fell off a cliff. We slowly adjusted him in. So I
I'd
have never
argue,
seen him put it together for a whole season. Are we sure right now that we haven't seen, at least for this season, the best of Siakam?
yeah.
Like there is a complete possibility this guy is just a 20-point per game scorer for the rest of the season. There's also a possibility he completely maintains it. My point is, I am feeling more like we are very close to like state of emergency situation for the Raptors. They have to do something.
And you know what, Rob? Like that's not that bad. Like there's a lot of Raptors fans that may like panic and say or think that you and I are crazy. But for me, honestly, this 2023 draft is incredible. And
Jeez.
and if we can land anywhere in that top 10, like anywhere, like I really don't care. That is gonna be great. Like preferably in the top 7, probably.
Right.
But
Give
yeah,
yourself a chance at number 1.
exactly.
And I mean, you don't have to keep that pick. You
Exactly.
should,
Yeah, you don't have
but you
to.
don't have to, right? And I mean, if you're the Raptors and you're looking forward, right? And look, the Raptors, you know, big picture, big decisions, right? Pascal Siakam, Supermax, Fred VanVleet, is he going to regress or is he going to progress? We don't know that. Gary Trent Jr., is he part of your core or not? I think that, you know, to those of you who say management is partially at fault for the season we're having, I can see that. I've been very reluctant to agree with that take because I've always sort of said it's on the players, it's on the coaching. But there's a part of this where does management not know that putting this many guys whose future on this team is uncertain together all at once, and they're all young, relatively, that this could potentially end up badly?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely possible. So
Yeah. And I mean, you know, like, again, it's like roster construction, the lack of shooting. Okay. Like, you know, you can't necessarily expect that Otto Porter is going to miss 21 games this early into the season, right? You can expect he's going to miss 21 games throughout the season, but maybe not 21 games right out of the gate, right? Like that's incredibly unfortunate. Pascal Siakam that just slips on the floor, right? I am not one of those people who think that you win, like you go 10-0 in Siakam's absence instead of 5-5. I think maybe the difference is just 1 win or 2 wins. But even if you're just 1 and 2 wins better during that 10-game stretch with Siakam as opposed to without, right now, instead of being 3 games away from panicking, you're 5 games away from panicking. These little things, they do add up throughout the season, I think. So at some point, I think the Raptors are going to have to make a decision. I know that they don't want to be in no man's land. I'm going on the variables that I can say I know for a fact. I know for a fact they don't want to be in no man's land. And I know for a fact that they had very serious ambitions, and not only ambitions, but very clear-cut goals as an organization to be a second-round team, at least this year. Those are stated goals by this administration. And so if both of those things become sort of apparent that it's either going to be like it's impossible to do one, and it's very likely you end up in the other because you're not good enough to be a bottom seed. No matter who you sit right now, you know, you can sit OG, you can ask him, hey, OG, you feeling better? Give it 2 more games. You know, you can stealth tank your way to, you know, to be worse, but you can't be bad enough to compete with some of those really bad teams. And you probably will end up like 10th or 11th to have to play in the play, and then who knows what happens from there. So
yeah,
yeah,
I agree.
I think, you know, you just do the calculus at some point and you say, am I going to hinge everything on the 1.5% outcome of my team going on like a 20-game win streak or something, or being 20 games over 500 over the next little stretch, right? The season is early, but to make this move later on, I think is harder because other teams know your situation, right? If
They
you
do.
approach the trade deadline 10 games under 500, God forbid, you know, if you end up 10 games under 500 at the trade deadline, everybody knows you're a seller, you completely lose all leverage,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I think being proactive in this case is probably the best move. I haven't known this front office to be hyper proactive. They sometimes, no, would you agree with that statement? Like, would you agree that they're proactive or reactive? Which
I
of,
think they take a wait and see approach a
right.
bit. Yeah,
So I think waiting to the deadline would be reactive.
it would.
right? And I don't know this organization. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I don't know this organization should be panicky and reactive.
Let me tell you
Like,
this, like,
mhm,
for this team, like for me, I'm the type of fan where I'm not really okay. I'm gonna say it like this. Like I know a lot of people that are kind of, we always have a chance. Like every team has a chance. That's that's in the top 8 or anything like that. But I take kind of a more realistic. Some people always say pessimistic approach. I look at this team before the season starts, and I said to myself, it would be nice to get a really high seed and to see where it goes from there, gain more playoff experience. But I personally, I don't see this team winning a championship. I don't think that's
okay,
too much of a hot take. So
right.
seeing that, and then also having the awareness to see what's available in the draft or future moves to position your team to be able to get a superstar or two, you never know, then you have to have a big picture approach always, because we're not a team that attracts big time free agents, right? So you got to always have.
That's fair. And I
Yeah.
mean, like the Raptors got a glimpse, a very short glimpse into what being a lottery team is like in Tampa, right? They
Mhm.
got a top 4 pick, and you better believe that there were a world of offers for that number 4 pick from
Mhm.
teams wanting to trade up for one of these 4 very coveted players, right? So they got a picture of it. And I think one of the things Bobby Webster said was, you're surprised by some of the offers that come through. I'm paraphrasing, but that's, you know, and it was like, okay, so if we do end up with a hugely, like a very beneficial lottery pick that's not Scoot Henderson and or Victor Wembanyama and or maybe one of the other top 4 guys that we're enamored with, we're not in love with someone in that range,
Mhm.
right? Maybe we're very different draft. Like our front office's philosophy is hugely different from everybody else's. Not everybody else's. Like we've been known to target Scotty, right, as high as number 2 on our draft board.
Mhm.
That isn't where most teams had him, right? We've been known to target like guys like Pascal Siakam, whereas if you talk to other general managers, most of them had him slotted for the second round.
Yep.
So we tend to be even Dyson Daniels, right? I mean, there was rumored, but let's just say very substantiated rumor that the Raptors had entertained offers to get up to the number 4 or number 7 picks this offseason. And the compromise there would be OG Anunoby, and the payback would be some veteran for the filler, like a very good veteran,
Mhm.
plus that pick. And I can't say I have any inside information on this, but I think that the player they were really targeting was Dyson Daniels. So, and that's not a player that was even top 10 on a lot of people's boards. The Pelicans took him 8th because he was higher on their board. Most teams probably would have let him slide till like 12, 13. So we are very unconventional in the sense that we tend to draft players, want players. So if we end up at 7, I'm pretty sure the player we want will probably be there,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
But if that player doesn't exist, it's at least a hell of a way to leverage the player that we don't want, who's slotted to be there, into potentially a package deal for a star, right?
Mhm.
Because it's one thing to trade a future pick, but once you actually land into the 6th spot and guys, other GMs start putting faces to that draft pick, like that's the guy that I want. That's the guy I'm going to pick with that pick. For whatever reason, emotionally, that pick value goes through the roof.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. So if you could take like 7th or 8th pick and there's a really, young prospect that other teams are clamoring over, plus your 2025 pick or something like that, and I don't know, a contract, whoever it is, you could actually potentially parlay that into a really good piece. I mean, so it might not be a lost season, but I think the only thing that would create a lost season would be aiming for something and falling exactly as short as you don't want to. I also, to be honest, this might be a hot take, but I have no interest in being the 8th seed or the 7th seed.
No. No.
I'm a Raptor
Why?
fan, but I do not have faith in because it's just a repeat, right? It starts to create, an expectation. And, do I think that the Raptors have like the offensive power or like some sort of superstar talent? Like I would feel very differently if this team had traded for Kevin Durant in the offseason and we just gone through a slew of injuries. I wouldn't mind going to 8th or 7th because I'd be like, you know what? He could have a really hot series and just gun you through the first round, no matter who
Yeah.
you're playing.
Yeah.
But I
That's
don't
a
have that
what
level
if.
of faith
Yeah.
in this team right now. So, Yeah, I'm very curious to watch the next 3 games. I think the next 3 games, I hate to say it, I don't mean to be sensational. I don't work for the Raptors. I'm not trying to get you to tune into these games, but I think wow, this I'm gonna sound like Skip Bayless or something when I say this. I feel like the season hinges on the next 3 games. I really do think that is like the season is hanging by a thread.
Yo,
It's
you know
not
what's crazy?
what's up?
I told my brother this literally last night, like yesterday. I told him, I said, if you want to see the way the Raptors season plays out, let's just take a look at the next 3 games and where they're at, because
Wow.
it's like a maker, like, and I agree with you 100%. It's not sensationalizing it. It's just simply looking at the rest of the schedule
Yep.
and where they're at and the amount of losses versus, you know, their win loss.
That's how you should count it. You should always count the win-loss from the loss column, not the win column.
That's what, yeah, exactly. Like,
Somebody
and
taught me that. I can't remember who did it. I think it was a scout because I mentioned that my team, this team was ahead of that team. He's like, yeah, but that team has more losses, and I'm like, yeah, but this team is like you always count by the losses.
yeah, we'll
That's
be
interesting.
13. Let's say we go 0-3, just to, you know, doomsday. Let's say we go 0-3. We'll be
Okay.
13-19, right?
Yeah,
Like,
like your odds from 13 and 19 to ever get like, and let's say a target to get to fifth, let's say fifth seed is salvageable, sixth seed is getting scary, right? Sixth
mhm,
seed, you probably end up against one of those teams that you don't give us an odds on, right?
mhm.
To get to fifth seed, I think this year in the East, you're gonna have to be 10 games over 500,
Yeah.
right? Because I expect the top 2 teams to be about 25 to 30 games over 500.
And the winning percentage you're gonna have for in order to get there is like ridiculous, like in the 7, like 0.7 something, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
so I
not
mean,
sustainable.
if you fall 6 games under 500 in order to get 10 games over 500, you need to be a plus 16 win loss throughout the
Mm,
rest of the way, which means that, I mean, yeah, anyone at home, you can do the math, right? You're like whatever number of games, and then you have to be 16 over on those. It's not impossible. Of
it's
course,
not
it's not
impossible, but it's
impossible.
highly unlikely.
It is extremely unlikely because I will also tell you the win streaks are really hard
Hmm.
because right now you're playing teams that are kind of taking you seriously because you're the Toronto Raptors. You have a reputation of being a winning team, right?
Hmm.
But if you start like reeling off like 2, 3 wins, 4 wins, 5 wins, like if you start going on like, oh, this team is 10-2 in its last, you're going to face a different version of those teams, which is like a very locked in, dialed in version of a team that's coming to play their A game. I think it's like kind of a, something I was talking about it. And I'll make this kind of the final point of the show because these shows
Yeah.
tend to go really long and I
Yeah.
love these conversations. And
Yeah.
someone asked me in the community post, they're like, Rob, you know so much about basketball. Why would you hold a call-in show? Bob McCowan doesn't hold a call-in show with a whole bunch of people who don't know anything about basketball. I'm like, bro, how can you listen to these conversations and think these people don't know anything about basketball? I love these conversations. I think I'm getting more out of this than everybody. Like, I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my point is, I think most superstars, like real superstars, I don't think they try every game. That's
Mhm.
sort of my sneaking suspicion. Like, I don't mean like they mail it in. I just mean like they kind of go through it. Like, I
Didn't
don't.
Draymond Green say that on his little barbershop show? Like, he says, when we're facing these low end teams, we just come in going through the motions. We don't really try against these weaker teams.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that's the case for a lot of teams, right? I really do. I don't think that's specific to the Warriors. I remember, I think it was like 2007 or 2008. I talked to a player who would definitely know. And he was just like, yeah, he said something about, because I met them there was like a bar downtown, right? And I was like, don't you guys have a game tomorrow? They're like, it's not one of those games. And it was like 1 a.m. and I'm like, oh my God, like you have an afternoon game tomorrow. And it's like, it's not one of those games that you get up for, right?
Yeah.
And I found that kind of surprising, but it's true. And I think that's the same thing with superstars. I think there are games where superstars really get up for, like at LA, at the Lakers,
Hmm.
against LeBron, against KD, against the Boston Celtics. And once you become a good team, you're one of those teams that
Yeah.
teams just get up against. I think the Dallas Mavericks are cursed because everyone gets up to play them, but they're not very good.
Yeah.
That's the worst part because Luka is so hype, right? But you get up to play the Bucks because Giannis is coming to town. Giannis is a former MVP. You get up to play Nikola Jokic. Like there's a psychological component of this, right? Joel Embiid probably circles every game against Denver every year,
Of course. Yeah.
right? because that's a game that he has to dominate. That's like a mano-a-mano matchup with Jokic. He's lost MVP to him. There's absolutely that. You highlight the team that passed on you in the draft. You don't think Jason Tatum remembers, that Philadelphia didn't want him? Of course he does. He torches them. Torched them in his rookie season.
Terrible. Another L for the Sixers. My goodness.
Yeah. So it's like, I think there's a component to this. So I think like that's the thing that makes when you fall this far under 500, that's I think what makes it super difficult to get back up, is that when you start getting up, teams start treating you differently. And so sometimes it's like in a game, right? Just within a game, you jump out to a 20-point lead against a team that's like better than you. Usually you lose that game because you wake them up too early.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in Fast and Furious, pressing the NOS button, you press too soon, right? The other guy catches up. So it happens all the time. Like where a really young team is really excited, and maybe an older team is kind of like, we're gonna go through the motions. And then they start hitting threes, and it's like 20-4. And this young team is off to a blistering start. And then the coach calls a timeout and says, okay, guys, time to adjust. These guys are actually here to play. They're not usually here to play, but they're here to play now. Like that's what happened against I think that's what happened Boston to Orlando last night. I don't think that Boston had any expectation that, just because they beat the Raptors twice, that they were going to come into TD, and beat the Celtics. But they, and they tried to come back. They couldn't. For whatever reason, maybe they just didn't have it that night. I think that goes into the game approach. So, yeah, I think again to reiterate, I think 3 more games lost without a game won, and I think it's officially time for state of emergency, and we need to have that conversation. I do not want to see this team like continue to bury themselves, wait till the trade deadline, and start parting out pieces and or finish 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th, 5th. So if 4th place is out, I don't see a point.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, Gil.
Well,
thanks so much.
Very interesting to see. Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show.
My pleasure.
I'm gonna be watching these 3 games very closely.
Me too.
Yeah, we'll see.
Me too. Tomorrow, Leo and I are gonna come on, and we're gonna at least this is the plan. Tomorrow afternoon, we're gonna do a live game breakdown of Scotty Barnes' 4th quarter. And this may happen, this may not happen, but we're going to try to do it. We're going to try to schedule it out so we can go play by play and just show how he's getting these advantages and how the Nets played him. And tomorrow night, obviously, after the game, we'll do our post game. So thanks a lot, Gil. Thanks a lot to everybody. And catch you guys next time.
Take care.
See you guys.